Welcome back, everyone. It's Friday. This is the Revenue Governor. I am April, your host, and we are working through control signals. Today, we are on control signal 3, pipeline without qualification. What shouldn't be in your pipeline? Well, let's get into it. Pipelines are one of the most trusted assets in a revenue organization. It's what leadership uses to understand coverage. It's what boards use to, that's funny. It's what boards use to assess risk. It's what forecasts are literally built on. One of the least challenged systems inside the entire organization. Want to know what it is? You guessed it, your pipeline. Well, because most teams are trained to grow pipeline, increase your pipeline, build your book of business. Very few are trained on how to control it. So the questions leaders ask becomes how much pipeline do you really have instead of what is in your pipeline that should not exist. That's one of the differences that changes everything because pipeline doesn't usually fail from lack of deals. It fails from lack of removal. Keeping something in your pipeline for too long, that does not help you. If they're not being used, if they're not moving forward, get rid of them. Pipeline growth feels like progress, right? This is the illusion of growth. More deals, more opportunities, more coverage. But because most dashboards reward growth, the organization always begins associating pipeline size with health. But pipeline is one of the easiest metrics to inflate. You can add deals early, you can keep deals longer, you can delay disqualification. And all three make pipeline look stronger while making the system weaker. So what leadership sees is growth. But what actually exists is accumulation. So a real scenario, what would this really look like? This shows up in very specific ways. So a deal gets added after a good call. No confirmed problem, no validated stakeholder, but it enters your pipeline. It sits there in stage 2 for 3 weeks. No new information, no movement, but it stays. A deal reaches late stage, but there's no defined decision process. Still, it's forecasted. If you work through most pipeline deal by deal, you will find that deals are hopeful, they are assumed, they are already lost, but they are still active. And all of them contribute to the number. Thinking through this, what I want you to think about is where does the qualification actually break? Because qualification is not failing because teams don't believe in it. It's failing because it's not enforced. And if you really think about your leader, do they have an issue enforcing? Or are they pretty good at it? Enforcing it's very discomforting, especially if it's not something that you are comfortable with in yourself, right? So most organizations, they may have some version of qualification criteria, but they treat it as guidance more than enforcement. It's not necessarily a requirement that is enforced. So deals move forward and they move forward based on maybe interest, responsiveness, maybe the tone that you heard on the call, instead of a validated problem, a confirmed stakeholder, a defined buying process, and a clear next step that is tied to the actual decision. When qualification becomes subjective, pipeline becomes unstable. Why do you think that is? Well, because qualification is subjective. Each rep defines qualify differently. Your reality, it is way different than mine. Moving on, let's talk about this from a manager level, but a failing manager level. Managers, they're reviewing pipeline weekly, but most reviews, they focus on updates. What happened? What's next? How does this work? Very few managers, and I mean very seldom, stop the deal and they ask, why does this deal exist? Or what proof do we have that this belongs in the current stage? Because asking those questions, well, that slows the meeting down. It creates tension. So instead, the review moves quickly. Deals stay, pipelines grow, yada, yada, right? The system learns something though. Presence equals validity. Well, that's not right, guys. That's so not right. Forecast corruption has an actual layer. This is where the real damage happens because pipeline feeds the forecast. And if pipeline is inflated, the forecast becomes what? Distorted. Early stage deals get counted way too seriously. Mid-stage deals, they carry way too much weight. Late stage deals, they appear stronger than they actually are until the literal day that you're having to send your leader what your projection is, and it's so wrong. So leadership starts adjusting. Not because they want to, but because they have to. Commit becomes interpretation. Best case becomes hopeful. And forecast calls become narrative, not analysis. Now, there's a tension within leadership here, though, because most leaders know parts of their pipelines are weak, but removing them creates immediate pressure. And who in the world really likes pressure? Well, I love pressure. I think I perform way better under pressure. But removing them, it creates intense pressure. Your pipeline, they shrink, coverage drops, the number looks at risk. So the system delays removal because keeping deals feels safer than losing them, even if those deals were never even real to begin with. This is one of the biggest contradictions in revenue leadership. I see this so often. Keeping bad pipeline feels like protection, but it's actually what creates instability for an organization. And I don't know if you've ever worked at a startup, but instability creates a lot of intense pressure. Let's talk about the cultural consequence. This is a new layer. We haven't really discussed this before. Over time, the system teaches people what matters. If deals stay without proof, reps learn proof is optional. If deals advance without qualification, reps learn qualification is flexible. These are dangerous words. If removal rarely happens, reps learn pipeline is permanent. And once those behaviors become normal, well, fixing that pipeline becomes much, much harder because you're not just correcting deals, you're correcting what the system has taught the team. And data. Data teaches us even if we don't want it to, right? What does a controlled pipeline actually feel like? Well, let's discuss it. A controlled pipeline will feel different. It's much smaller, it's sharper, concise. If you know me, you know I love concise. Deals, they enter slowly, but they move with purpose. Stages mean something. Movement requires evidence, and removal happens regularly, not as a reaction. It's a discipline. Leaders trust the pipeline not because it's large, but because it is real. Now, how can you actually fix this broken pipeline? This is where most teams fail. They understand the problem, but they don't know how to correct it. The fix is not adding better deals. It's not removing invalid ones. It starts with this. Define what must be true for a deal to stay, not just enter. Then enforce time-based inspection. If nothing has changed in 14 days, the deal is reviewed, not updated, reviewed, and most importantly, normalize that behavior. Or should I say that removal of that deal? Make it visible, make it expected, make it part of performance, because removal is not loss, it is control. Here's your assignment. In your next pipeline review, do something different. Go deal by deal and ask, what proof do we have that this belongs here? I actually have someone that taught me how to do this so closely. Her name is Newton. She's absolutely lovely. But I remember prior to being in leadership, her calling me into my one-on-one, going through my pipeline, and she would go through these deals, deal by deal, and ask me all of these questions to make sure not only that I knew my pipeline, but that she knew it and she understood it. And she loved that I had the answer because I stayed on top of my pipeline. Anywho, ask your rep, what proof do we have that this belongs here? If the answer is unclear, you pause, real quick, pause. That pause is where truth enters the system. The pipeline begins to get smaller. The forecasts are stronger. Pipeline without qualification doesn't miss forecasts. It manufactures them. Because when deals enter without proof and they stay without progress, the number isn't at risk. It never was real to begin with. Revenue control signal 3, pipeline without qualification. Until next time.